here?
It is.
It's recording? Okay. Thank you.
You have to get rid of the rating.
Pardon?
You have to get rid of the rating.
Okay, so here?
I think it's the 3 dots. So just on the very top, right? The very top. First of that way. So that's fire right. And then the 3 dots are wrong. The second one's wrong.
This one?
Second one is the bottom.
This one.
Second one from the bottom.
This one. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're ready to go. Huh? Okay. And back to lesson plan. That up. Okay. We'll go with the notes. Organization of parties. And it, oh, not yet. 1 minute yet. And it's up to. And, Now, cyber campus. Thank you. Log in. Hopefully that. I don't want to log in, so I've gotta log in. And okay, so we don't forget to do the smart attendance. And so you go here, English, and here, and attendance. And here we are in week 10. Or actually somewhere, because start attendance, and it's 328. 328 is your lucky number. 328 for smart attendance. So see if I can go back to the Zoom. 328. And where's the chat function at? Huh? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so it's recording. I'll just let that go. I mean, I don't want to do that. So I just want to get away from that. Yeah. And go back to here, the files I opened. Okay, we're reading about political parties and the Europeanization of political parties. So this is from a very good textbook, maybe the best textbook for Introduction to Political Science. What's this? Introduction to Political Science in the United States, Understanding the Political World. And this textbook summarizes the political science research on political parties, interest groups, political participation. And I thought it might be nice to spend a little time to go through political parties and their role and their place in relation to other ways by which you and I can participate in politics, participate as citizens in Korean politics or Bulgarian politics or Polish politics. And there are, of course, many different ways to participate in politics. And voting for political parties and political candidates is one way to participate, but there are other ways to participate as well. You can join a national liberation organization and fight and die as an activist and revolutionary against the Japanese occupiers or the German occupiers or the American occupiers and their puppets. so-called puppets in Afghanistan, for example. That's one very powerful form of political participation. But we ideally want to create a world in which people can participate without the threat and use of physical violence against each other to control and shape each other's political participation. We don't like that because we are human rights advocates. We are liberal Democrats. We want to create a political environment in Korea, or we say we want to in Afghanistan, or in South Vietnam, or in South Korea, or in the United States, in which we participate without using coercion, without relying upon the threat and use of deadly force to control each other and influence each other. We want to instead rely upon persuasion. That's what political democratic participation involves. And creating political parties seems to be a very important part of how to go about creating a democratic liberal political system, that we need to create institutionalized institutions for political participation so that we all know what the rules are for political participation and we agree on the rules for participation. And by having agreement on these rules and roles that you and I have as citizens of Bulgaria, citizens of South Korea, citizens of Poland, citizens of the European Union also, that we have the rule of law. The rule of law was a theme in the textbook, and particularly in the Europeanization of the former communist countries in discussing corruption and the problem of corruption making government officials very weak in terms of implementing their policy obligations as members of the European Union, because government officials do not follow the rules. The rules are written down somewhere, they're written down, but they're on paper. They're not really in the minds and hearts of people. And this is a legacy of imperialism. This is a legacy of being controlled by an outside foreign power. And in the view of many people, the rules and roles were created by the Japanese in South Korea, or the Americans in Afghanistan, or the Americans in South Vietnam. And these rules and roles written down on paper are therefore the rules and roles for imperial control and domination. Now, of course, communism in Bulgaria and Poland ended 30 years ago, but still, Stalinism and communism had a very big impact on these peoples in different ways, among different groups within Poland, within Bulgaria, because Poland and Bulgaria did radically change under communism. And for many people, they acquired social mobility. They acquired opportunities under communism to go from being poor, illiterate peasants, barely able to survive, to moving to the city, to learning, getting an education, learning how to read and write, moving to the city, getting an apartment, getting a job, becoming modern. So Polish people and Bulgarian people have mixed feelings about what happened under communism. The Poles tend to have more negative views about what happened under communism because, rightly or wrongly, they are more likely than Bulgarians to believe that it didn't have to happen that way, that they could have modernized in another way, the way Spain modernized. Bulgaria, as we mentioned earlier, Bulgaria was a country which was more provincial, more backward, more underdeveloped than Poland when communism came to Bulgaria. Plus, the Bulgarians have a long tradition of looking to Russia as another Orthodox Christian Slavic country speaking a language that is related to, understandable to Russians, and as the birthers or the creators of the Christian Bible for the Orthodox population of the Slavic world. The Russian Bible, the Christian Bible in Russia, is written in Old Church. Well, it was originally written in Old Church Slavic. Old Church Slavic, according to Bulgarians, is Old Bulgarian. Like for the Orthodox Slavs of Russia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Old Church Slavic is to them what Latin language is to Catholics. So yes, if you go to Mass in Bulgaria, you go to church service, you can't see Jesus here, but if you go to church service on a Sunday, the priest will speak in Bulgarian, and the service will be in Bulgarian or Russian or Greek, whatever language the people use. But originally, until about 200 years ago, the services were said in the old language of 1,500 years ago, called Old Church Slavic. And Bulgarians claim Old Church Slavic language was Old Bulgarian language. That's the way Bulgarians spoke Bulgarian language 1,500 years ago. So they're very proud of Old Church Slavic, and they claim it's a gift of the Slavic Bulgarians to the Russians, to the Serbs, to the Ukrainians, all the other Orthodox Slavic peoples. And so the point I'm making is the Bulgarians have a closer feeling to the Russians than the Polish people do, for a number of reasons. I already mentioned one, that Bulgaria was more underdeveloped compared to Poland when the Soviet Red Army conquered or entered those countries. Poland is Catholic. It has always been Catholic. For 1,000 years, it has been Roman Catholic, not Slavic, not Orthodox. They speak a language close to Bulgarian, but they're Catholic. They're not Orthodox. And so the point is that in Bulgaria, there is more a stronger pro-Russian feeling, or not necessarily pro-Russian, but a feeling that the communist period was actually part of Bulgaria's national history. That it, in the sense that it was part of Bulgaria's development. That when you describe the history of Bulgaria, you have to talk about the founding of Bulgaria 1,500 years ago. Okay, yes. And then you can talk about the Bulgarian kingdom, the conquest of Bulgaria by the Turks, and then the first independent Bulgarian kingdom in the modern time in the 250 years ago. Yeah, 250 years ago. Is that right? 218, wait, 1971 is, no, 200 years ago. 200 years ago, 1870. 1970, 150 years ago, 1870. And then communism came. And communism did a lot of important things for Bulgaria. Bulgaria became a modern country. Bulgaria developed its first major nuclear power. Bulgaria actually had nuclear power plants that were built on Bulgaria at Kozloduy under contract from the Soviet Union. Other communist countries did not have nuclear reactors, but Bulgaria did. And the nuclear reactor and the atom and nuclear energy, that is considered to be modern, right? If you have nuclear power, nuclear technology, you are considered to be a developed country. So, and this is reflected in the parties today, in the political party systems in these countries today. We covered earlier, I asked you in an exercise, what is more important, culture or institutions in explaining long-term political behavior trends in a country? And we compared Bulgaria, which, like Greece, had been part of the Ottoman Turkish Empire until the 19th century for hundreds and hundreds of years. Greece never fell under communism. Greece had a civil war, but did not fall under communism, did not fall under Soviet control like Bulgaria. Bulgaria was under communism from the 1940s until 1990. And so you compare very different institutions. Greece is in NATO, Greece is in the European Union. Bulgaria was in the communist bloc, in the communist economic system, in the communist military system. And today, in 2021, they have similar problems, high levels of corruption. And so I asked you in that exercise, what is more important for explaining behavior of a community, social and economic and political? And you decided, and when you voted, that culture is more important than institutions. And comparing Greece and Bulgaria seems to provide proof for that point, right? And this may still be true also in describing the parties in the European Union of the member states, because the textbook is about the member states. And remember, always keep in mind, the European Union is supposed to be a strategy for peace, peace, peace in the countries of Europe that until end of World War II had killed each other by the thousands, even millions, and are still killing each other in Yugoslavia, well, until 1999 or 2000, and are still killing each other in Ukraine and in the Caucasus, if you consider Azerbaijan and Armenia to be part of the part of Europe. And so culture is really important, but what can we do? If we are the leaders of European integration, if we are the elite, as we described in the previous class, that is driving, constructing this European Union project under the theoretical viewpoint of constructivism, this is an elite-driven project. What can we do? And what we can do is work with institutions. But there are limits to what institutions can do. Institutions did not prevent Brexit. Institutions of Europeanization may have inspired or encouraged Britain leaving the European Union, because Britain did not support creating an ever closer union of the peoples of Europe. And as the European Parliament became more influential under the Treaty of Maastricht and so on, European institutions are what we can work with to try to shape and guide these communities, the member states, the people within them who are going through tremendous stress and strain, and also often unsatisfied expectations. See, Bulgarians as a national community don't have these big dreams the way the Polish people have big dreams. What do I mean? I mean that Polish people, as I said, they believe and understand that they are one of the great nations of Europe. They're equal to anybody else in Europe. When they look at their history, what they imagine is their history, because, you know, what we perceive, including what we think we see in the past, is shaped by our drives and needs and motivations right now, including how I see you and how I see the past. But Polish people believe that they're one of the great nations of Europe, and they have great power capabilities. And they have demonstrated their critical role in saving Europe against the Bolsheviks and the communists at the end of World War I and during the rise of communism in the old Russian Empire, when the Russian Soviet Red Army attempted to invade Germany through Poland, when Germany was defeated, and the Polish people stopped them with the miracle on the Vistula River. You know, we talk about the miracle on the Marne, where the French stopped Germans' invasion to conquer Paris at the beginning of World War I on the Marne River in France. The miracle on the Vistula, the Polish people say, compared to the miracle on the Marne River in France. And then Poland played critical role historically, of course, earlier in the defeat of the Turks in the Battle of Vienna, right? So the point is that Polish people have stronger expectations of what they think the world owes them and what they think Europeans owe Poland, what Poland deserves. And for many Polish people, that's not being satisfied. Bulgarians, they're more humble, they're more modest. They have lower levels of power, relative power capability, self-image. Their self-image collectively as a nation regarding their relative power capabilities compared to the other peoples of Europe is really small. And so they don't have high expectations, collectively speaking. They have dreams, I know, but I'm talking about expectations for the nation. And this shows up in the political party system in these countries, in these Eastern European countries. And again, if you're focusing on European Union as a strategy for peace, you want to promote peaceful, nice, democratic parties to become more influential in Poland, in Bulgaria, in Hungary, also in Russia, and also in Ukraine, and also, of course, in the established old members of the European Union. You want the good parties to rise and the bad parties representing authoritarian right-wing nationalism to do worse in national politics, in national elections. And that's not easy to do. Right? It's still a responsibility that falls upon the political elites of the member state. And if the political elites, leadership in the member states do not support it, it will not work, as we saw in the case of United Kingdom leaving the European Union. There was a big faction of the British political elite that did not want to be in this ever closer union of the European Union, so they left. And the mass of the population voted to leave, and that was a referendum. They did not have to have that referendum, but the elites decided to have the 2016 British referendum on whether or not to stay in the European Union. They did not have to have it, but they wanted to have it because the Conservative Party wanted to have it. But in France, the elites, more so, do not want to leave the European Union, do not believe that they can thrive and be great again outside of the European Union, the way the British believe, many, that they can be great outside of the European Union. And so they do not have a referendum. Although, as I pointed out to you, right, Emmanuel Macron, president of France, said, what, last year or 2 years ago, that if France had a referendum on whether or not to leave the European Union, he said, I can find it, I'll show it to you next class. He said they would probably pass in France. And, you know, that should not be surprising. They already rejected the draft European Union Constitution Treaty 16 years ago in 2005. But the French elites do not want to have a referendum on that question. No more referendums. So the political parties in Poland and the political parties in Bulgaria reflect a lot of different values and attitudes within their countries, but that also includes the different importance of nationalism. Poland is more nationalistic than Bulgaria. And that means there's a lot more conflict and dispute among the elites about what Poland should be doing within the European Union, what the Polish government should do to make Poland a powerful, successful, prosperous country. What should we do with those people who cooperated with those same occupiers that put the bullet in the head of all of those Polish soldiers at the Katyn Forest massacre during World War II? Those Poles who cooperated and collaborated with those murderers. What should we do with those people? So, but as I said, these are big questions, big cultural issues, questions of history. What can we do to try to make the world a safer, peaceful place? We have to work with institutions. What else are we going to work with? So we try to promote, when I was in Bulgaria, there was lots of focus from European Union and United States funding for trying to help the Bulgarians set up political parties, giving them training, sending officials from US government agencies and non-governmental organizations to meet with the new and rising Bulgarian political elite to teach them how to create a political party, how to have political campaigns, because we do that in America for many, many, many years. So we'll teach you Bulgarians how to have a democratic political campaign in your new democracy. And the European Union and the European Council, or the Council of Europe, the human rights organization, And the different countries of the world, from Britain, from the United States, were sending aid to Bulgaria and also to Poland and all the countries to try to teach them how you do liberal democracy. And they were doing that in Russia as well, but now the Russian government is shutting down all of those programs, viewing them, stereotyping them as soft power spies and agents of American imperialism. And if you're a poor Bulgarian, bright English-speaking Bulgarian, there's no money in my country, these Americans and Europeans come to your community, come to university, and if you set up a non-governmental organization, we'll give you 1,000 euros a month as you are the new director of this new non-governmental organization working to establish human rights for gender minorities or for the gypsies or setting up a new political party. And 1,000 euros a month, that's a lot of money in Bulgaria when a cup of coffee costs 200 won. That's a lot of money, right? And so, again, focusing on the elite, focusing on the future elite, you, young people, English-speaking bright students, for example. So, political parties, that's the context for understanding why this chapter focuses on political parties, but there are other ways to participate in politics. And so here's a nice little table, different ways of participating: revolutionaries, protesters. This can include violence, right? Characteristic action of being a revolutionary or protester, you can undertake violence against the political order. What is the name of the Korean man who assassinated the Japanese prime minister in the 1920s? Yeah, so he would be here. He was a revolutionary protester. That was his way of participating in politics in the Japanese Empire. Riots, you saw that in January 6th in the United States, the riot in the Washington, D.C. Capitol building for the U.S. Congress, instigated by Trump. Engage in civil disobedience. You see this in Black Lives Matter movement that started in the United States, but then spread around the world into Britain and to other countries with large African diasporas. Join in public protest demonstrations. This happens in South Korea as well, right? Attend protest meetings, refuse to obey unjust orders. These are all forms of political participation. Voting is just one of them. Participating in parties. Partisan means parties, right? Being a strong partisan activist for the Democratic or the Socialist Party of Bulgaria or Poland. That's one form of political participation, but there are other forms as well. Government activists, join the government if you want to participate. And of course, satisfy your career drives. Typically, this can also involve opportunities to gain the self-esteem and respect if the government is considered to be a real government representing the Afghan people or the Vietnamese people or the Korean people. You become respected official. Of course, this is a problem in Afghanistan today, that these people who are working in the Afghanistan government are seen by the supporters of the Taliban as puppets of the Americans. They're the Chinilpa of Afghanistan working for the Americans. And when the American military leaves Afghanistan, that government will collapse, like the South Vietnamese government collapsed long before you were born. But I remember it in 1975. And, you know, a lot of people did join the Polish communist government or the Bulgarian socialist government because people have dreams, they have ambitions, and to be always poor and always be shut out. When the communists control the country, many people will make that decision that I'm a bright, young Afghan student who can speak English. Yeah, I know the Americans put this government in power, and I know I was raised a Muslim, and I know what the Americans do to Muslims in Iraq and Palestine and all of those bad things, but I also like making some money so I can feed my family. I mean, one of the reasons why the Afghanistan army is so bad is because people join it, not because they want to defend Afghanistan against the terrible Taliban, but because the Americans pay you $10 a day. And that's a lot of money in Afghanistan if you become a soldier, when there's no other jobs, when there's no other ways to make money to get married and support your children. Yeah, I'll join the American-dominated military and get $10 a day. But you don't fight very well, you know, if you do some things like that. I think it's $10. Is it $10? Yeah, I think it's $10 a week. I'm sorry, I think it's $10 a week. Money goes a long way in Afghanistan. Partisan activists, I already said, join a political party. This is what the Americans try to promote, what the European Union tries to promote in the former communist country. Form modern political parties. And of course, in Bulgaria and Poland, you saw who was the best organized political party in 1990 after communism collapsed? Well, it was the old Communist Party. These people that joined the Communist Party joined the only legal organization outside of the government that you were allowed to join as a political organization. So these communist parties became socialist parties. They changed their name and they became some variation on the word socialist. And they were the best organized, the best funded, the most professional, and that has been an advantage for them. And that's true in Bulgaria. The Bulgarian Socialist Party, I think I mentioned in the previous class, the Bulgarian Socialist Party is in a sense an establishment party, a hegemonic party that is right now trying to form a government in Poland, in Bulgaria, a month after the elections on April 4th. Bulgaria had national parliamentary elections a month ago on April 4. And the Bulgarian Socialist Party was given the task of trying to form a government. And the president of Bulgaria, not the prime minister, the president, he is also a Socialist Party member. But in Poland, the same conditions apply, but the socialist left party, the SLD party, the former communist party, it's disappeared. That's described in the textbook on Poland. Even though that party gave Poland presidents, Alexander Kwaśniewski, he was a former communist. He was president of Poland from 1995 until at least 2000. He was president of Poland. He had been a young communist. And here we are in 2021, and we see that the Socialist Party in Poland has basically disappeared from the Polish parliament, because the Poles are more nationalistic. Would you vote for a party that claims that, yes, we are the Chin-Il-Pa party? We are the descendants of those people that collaborated with the Japanese. Poland, you know, Bulgarians, okay. Poland, we know what to do with Chin-Il-Pa. And their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And the European Union says, no, don't do it. Don't become fascistic. No, don't become fascistic. Community activists, these are people that participate in non-governmental organizations, right? They're active in community organizations. They form groups to work on local problems, contact officials on social issues, and work with others on local problems. Communicators, these are people who, well, this is more prominent today on the social media because this is a lot easier to do now. They write letters to the media. They send support or protest messages to political leaders. I mean, when I was your age, wow, you know, have you ever used what's called a typewriter? You never, I mean, if you wanted to write a letter to your senator or your president or your congressman, You had to get that big piece of machinery, right, from IBM, and you know, it's big, metal, heavy, and you turn it on, it goes, and then you have to type, oh, mistake. Get out the white out fluid. I mean, writing a letter to your congressman, can you imagine what a pain in the neck it was? Now, if you want to be a communicator and send a message to Moon Jae-in's office or the Prime Minister of Italy, you just get on the internet and type in a message and go to their website and type in a message and send it, right? So that's maybe a little less significant today because it's too easy. Contact specialists, they're lobbyists, right? Lobbyists is a way to participate in politics, lobbying for corporations, for labor unions, voters. That's just one of many ways to participate in politics. But typically you have to vote for somebody or some party. So if we want to institute rules and roles for regular participation in which everybody agrees on the outcome and doesn't use violence and force when they do not like the outcome because they all accept the rules and roles, then we have to organize elections and we have to have political parties that are effective in campaigning for elections in the new young democracies. Supporters and patriots, you support the political system, you participate in the political system by obeying the laws, by paying your taxes, by expressing your love for your country. And that shapes other people's political behavior. And then there are those people, and this is a big group of people, who are inactives. They do not have political opinions. They do not follow political events. They do not pay attention to news reports about politics. And this can be almost half of the population in some developed democracies. Remember, you and I, we are the unusual ones. We are the weird ones. We are the strange ones. Most people do not live and breathe and think about politics the way we do. They don't do that. And that's okay. That's Homo sapiens. But they can get excited sometimes by demagogues who remind them, remember, you should love your country. Remember, you should love George Washington. Remember, you should love King Sejong the Great because you were taught about King Sejong the Great in school. And so I will try to implement, if I'm a political candidate running for president, I will try to implement the spirit of King Sejong the Great in modern Bulgaria, modern Korea. Yay! You have to appeal to these people in simplistic, romantic, emotional terms because they can vote in elections, along with the college professors and the journalists and the teachers. These inactives, they can vote when they want to. And so highlighting this focus on ways of political participation. We should not view political participation, and remember, this defines what it means to be modern, that you want to participate in politics because you understand, unlike people 1,000 years ago or even 200 years ago, that your well-being, your condition, your well-being or suffering is the result of the choices of people, other people, not just you, but other people. And when you become aware of the fact that this world is created by humans, you want to participate in making that world because you have a stake in it. Remember, we talk about nationalism, right? We talked about this before. Hey, I'm giving you big secrets. I'm giving you big ideas here. Things that you should remember. Is this it? No, that's not it. Sorry, one other try here. and I have it here somewhere. Yeah, this is it, right? What defines being modern? Remember, these people are the inactives down below this line. These people are not aware of politics. The people above this line, they are aware of politics. The people at the very top of the pyramid, they are the most attentive and informed about politics. These people down here, they have difficulty finding South Korea or United States or Poland or Bulgaria on a map. They don't pay attention to politics. And I'm not saying that's bad. That's just the way they are. And they are a lot of people. And what is the essence of being modern? This is a big topic, right? If you go to any political science convention, whether it be the American Political Science Association or the International Studies Association, there'll be all this talk about modernity, modernity, modernity. What does it mean to be modern? And I'll tell you what it means to be modern. In the ideal, typical, modern society, modern community, your status, the honor I give to you, depends upon what you achieve. I watch you and I say, wow, look what this guy has done. He's president of Samsung. He went from, well, not Samsung, because you have to, see, that's an important point. In traditional societies, your status is based upon your birth. So who's president of Samsung now? Jay and Lee? And why is he president of Samsung? Because his dad was. And why was his dad president of Samsung? Because his dad was. In traditional societies, your status is dependent upon your birth. Your status is not through achievement. Your status is ascribed to. I give it to you. The society gives you status based upon what you're born into. You're born into the family of the founder of Samsung, you're going to be the next leader of Samsung. You were born into the family of the king, King Sejong the Great. You're the son of King Sejong the Great. You will be the next king. Why? Because you were born as the prince. But in modern societies, status is not ascribed. Yes, it is earned. You have to achieve. So the essence of modernity is the shift from ascription to achievement as the basis for gaining status and honor in a society. And until 300 years ago or 400 years ago, most societies were traditional. Most societies gained their status through ascription. I'm born a peasant, and I'm a peasant. Why? Because my dad was a peasant, and his dad was a peasant. And when I have children, my son will be a peasant, and my daughter will be a peasant. Why? Because God wants it that way. God created this world. God created the sky. God created the sun. God created the mountains, and God created me, and I am a peasant. And he's the Yangban. And why is the Yangban? Why is he the Yangban? Because God made him the Yangban. He made his family the Yangban, the aristocrats. It is the will of God. And I'm a baker, and my son will be a baker. Think about those English names, right? Mr. Baker, Mr. Smith, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Fletcher. You know what a Fletcher is? Fletcher, it puts the feathers on the arrow to fletch an arrow, right? Mr. Fletcher, Mr. Taylor. And I'm a baker. My son will be a baker. That's a traditional society. Your position in status in society depends upon your family. But when you become aware of the fact that you can change your status, you can change your status. How? By making more money. All of a sudden, if you make lots of money, people respect you. Even though you're just a baker. How are you making all of this money? Your father was a baker. Your grandfather was a baker. Now you're suddenly making lots of money as a baker because he figured out a way to supply the army with bread, pound, let us say. And look at all the money he's making. And he's not only making more money, but wow, people respect him. So this shift from ascription to achievement as the basis of status. I already put these notes up on the website. This shift from ascription to achievement as the basis for social status in society, where does it happen first in the world? Where does that happen first? In what region of the world? What area of the world? Yeah, in what area? In what region? Begins with an E. Yay! Europe! Because the pace of economic change accelerates in Europe. And as it accelerates, people can see their world changing around them. And they become aware of the possibility of social change. And when they become aware of the possibility, the reality of social change, they start to question. Well, why is he the king? He's a jerk. He's an idiot. He's the king. I don't think he should rule. Oh, blasphemy! The devil has occupied you. A demon has taken possession of you because you're saying, blasphemous thing. God made him the king. You don't think he should be the king? You serve Satan. The devil must have taken possession of you. Okay, so this happens first in Europe, and that's why this class is in English language right now, and not in Japanese, and not in Chinese. It's in English, because it happened first in Europe. You can't have a modern economy unless the shift from ascription to achievement happens. Do you understand? I'm trying to teach you secrets here of Homo sapiens. You're Koreans. You have a reputation of being very ambitious. To have ambition, dreams, you have to believe that you can change your status. How? Hard work, studying, sending my child to go live in America to perfect his English. To have dreams for me and my children. Ambition. And you believe you can achieve it. That's the essence of modernity. That's the basis of status in society, being on achievement, not ascription. Ambition. You can't have a modern economy without ambition among the people. You can change your condition. And political parties emerge and fall in the midst of this awareness about the possibility of change. So, and this happens first in Europe, and then the contact with the Europeans speeds up this process in other countries. So I already talked about this once before, and this line moves down, and by England, about the middle of the 19th century, England is 100% politically aware. These are the adult population, the people that are adults. This line is at the bottom here in England, in about 1850. And this progresses beyond among the other peoples of Europe and the world. So Iran becomes 100% politically aware during the Iranian Revolution in 1980, when I was your age. And the Kurds are among the last group in this category to become politically aware. So, as I already mentioned, when you become aware of politics, you start to demand the right of political participation. I know people make this world and they determine my well-being or suffering, so I want to participate. Public opinion. People watching, paying attention to politics and having opinions about it and wanting to participate in it and to participate in deciding who rules them. People also go from being members of a village, a clan, to becoming aware of bigger communities that they share critical features with, critical characteristics. And all of those people seem to share a common fate, a common destiny. They go from being members of just of clans and families to become what we call nations. I am not just a villager living in a village. I am a Korean. I am Chinese. I am French. Remember, this happens first in Europe. The appearance of statewide institutions, particularly economic institutions, the middle class people, the tradesmen, they want standard rules and roles. Stop having to bribe corrupt Yangban aristocrats who say, it is my ancient feudal right as the Yangban Duke of this region, of this territory, that you, passing through my land, must give me 10% of all of your valuable product. Why? Because it is my ancient feudal right that my family has held for hundreds of years. That's not good enough. Don't tell me it's tradition. I want common rules and roles, statewide institutions. And the fourth factor, as I said, is elite alteration. So some of you highlighted this when in our discussion of fascism and authoritarian populism. You can see, again, this process at work with the rise of nationalism in Poland and Hungary, that this old elite is the old communist elite. And we, the true defenders of Polish identity, the true defenders of Hungarian national spirit, we want to participate, we want to control the government. And we form political parties. So the Nationalist Party in Poland is the Law and Justice Party, and they're now in power. And they're different from the other parties. But depending upon your motivations and drives and needs, you will join a party. Because as a person, one individual, you don't have much power. So you join interest groups, non-governmental organizations, and parties to bring your resources together so that you can have more influence to promote a Poland or a France or a Bulgaria or a Korea that you want to see. And also to achieve your own personal ambition. I want to become prime minister. I want to become a powerful politician. You have your individual, material, economic, and career dreams, and you also have your dreams for Korea, Poland, Hungary, and they get mixed together. Because that's human nature, right? People tend to believe that there's no conflict among all of the different multiple drives, motivations I have. I should be leader of Germany because I will save Germany. And I will save my beloved Germany. And I will also be the ruler of Germany. And I'll have all of that power. And that will be human nature. But the point is, forming interest groups and parties is what you have to do to participate more or less effectively in politics. In Poland, Hungary, Korea, Japan, anywhere. You've got to join a party. At least in institutionalized states. In Afghanistan, well, the Taliban is a non-governmental organization that wants to take control of the Afghan state. So that's the essence of modernity. When you go to Paris and study at a French university, and they ask you, Mr. Dongsong, you imagine you're sitting in a Paris cafe, drinking coffee, smoking Paris cigarettes, wearing a French beret, and a French intellectual says to you, Monsieur, what is the essence of modernity? That's the way they talk at these political science conventions. The essence of modernity and postmodernism. Modernism and postmodernism. And they ask you, what is the essence of modernity? You can say, the essence of modernity is... Yeah, baby! and that's what I spend all of my time studying. And this is not just a history lesson, right? Because this is where the Americans interfere in the Middle East. The Americans are trying to stop this process. So they ally with the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. America is at war with Arab nationalism and Islamic nationalism. That's what America's at war with. Pan-Arabism and Pan-Islamism. Remember the shift to large identity communities? I'm not just a peasant of an Arab village. I am not even just Syrian or Jordanian or Iraqi or Saudi. I'm an Arab. All 150 million of us, from Morocco all the way to Iran. The Americans go, no, 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 no. You're Iraqi, you're Jordanian, you're Moroccan, you're Libyan, you're Egyptian, you're Saudi, you're an Emirati. You're not going to create a unified Arab nation state the way the Italians and the Germans did in the 19th century by erasing those small, parochial, medieval, traditional, ascriptive borders between the Duchy of Milan and the Duchy of Veneto and the Papal States. No, 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 no. You're not going to do that because you'll threaten Israel. During the Cold War was, you'll threaten Israel and you're probably a communist anyway, working for Stalin or Brezhnev or Khrushchev. But there is no Soviet Union now. But still, we have lots of vested interests in the House of Saud and the ruling family of Kuwait and the Hashemite dynasty of Jordan. The British MI5 supports the Hashemite dynasty of Jordan. They're heavily involved still in Jordan. And by the way, Jordan is one of the only Arab countries that has a peace treaty with Israel. That's not a coincidence. And the Americans allied with the Catholic Yangban in South Vietnam to fight pan-Vietnamese nationalism. And the Americans helped keep the Chin Il Pa in power in South Korea after the Japanese left in 1950. Sometimes they win, sometimes technology, military technology is successful. It didn't work in Vietnam. It seems to be working in the Middle East. You know, desert, where are you going to hide against American air power? You know, in Vietnam, you have mountains covered by tropical jungle. There's no better place to fight the Americans than in Vietnam. You have lots of places to hide from American planes. But where are you going to hide in? But even now, the Americans are losing in Afghanistan. The power of nationalism. So, back to political parties. So, yeah, this focus on political parties is focused upon established states. If you want to participate, you have to join non-governmental organizations and political parties. Even if you protest, if you want your protest for the Black Lives Matter, for example, sooner or later you have to form an organization to continue to aggregate and gather people's resources and demands, to bring their resources together, to gather their demands, to formulate and articulate and express what do you want. Give me, if I'm a government official, give me someone to speak to. Give me someone to represent you. Give me somebody to negotiate with. So if you want those things, you have to form organizations and parties. But yeah, increasing recognition has emerged of the significant level of unconventional political action, demonstrations, protests, and rioting in both democratic and non-democratic countries. One of the benefits of protests and riots is that it gets the attention. It gets the attention of the government officials. Remember, government officials in Korea, in America, in Germany, in Poland, they're busy. and they're talking to powerful people who can give them money for their political campaigns, and they're trying to do their jobs, and they have lots of work to do, too much work to do, and they have too little time in the day. And you're a black person, let's say, upset about police violence against you in a town in Germany. I'm a government official in Germany. I'm in my office, my position, because of the victory of my political party. You black people don't vote for me. You don't have lots of votes. You don't vote for my party. I'm too busy to talk to you. I'll tell you, I'll use the American term. I'll blow you off somehow. I'll say, hey, well, yeah, go complain to somebody else. You know, oh yeah. Why don't you just send me an email? Send me an email. You want to catch my attention. You want to make me pay attention to you. How might you do that? Throw a brick through a window. Riot. Demonstrate. Loot. And, oh, okay, you got my attention. What do you want? You got my attention. What do you want? Okay, so you tell me, and hopefully you've already organized yourselves. So when I ask you, well, what the frick do you want? You'll say, I want this. And you can do it by doing that. Give me a program. But if you're going to give me a program, you have to be organized. You've got to be in a governmental or non-governmental organization or a party. So, and this is becoming more, we already talked about foot soldiers, political activists, foot soldiers, extremist activists, individual activists, militants get lots of attention. Some of them are revolutionaries, and if they're successful, they become famous, like Mao Zedong in China, Fidel Castro in Cuba, Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran. These people led social movements. Social movements are bigger than parties. Social movements are often driven by nationalism, but social movements are coalitions of parties and organizations that succeed in keeping pressure, political pressure, on the representatives of the state. So the Black Lives Matter protests, for that to be successful, yeah, they riot and protest, but then they must also have an organization that continues to exist and continues to mobilize its members, its different constituencies, its groups, to continue to express, articulate, protest, and express their demands through the media. And of course, the social media of the internet has made that easier, while at the same time diverting and dispersing so many voices, because anybody can post something on Facebook. Anybody can post something on Twitter, right? Or on Naver. So social movement, and these are the leaders of these are charismatic public figures. Mao Zedong, Ayatollah Khomeini, Adolf Hitler. He was the leader of a social movement and a political party. Social movements aren't always nice, but they're often driven by nationalism, right? That I want freedom for my people from the Japanese or from the Americans. You know, some have died, Che Guevara, Steve Biko in South Africa. They become living symbols. And political leaders, they are fascinating because they succeed in capturing supreme political power within a government and using it with extraordinary energy and effect, even if not for the good. And they have different titles. But typically for them to have that extraordinary political power, they have to be living symbols of the nation. Like Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran overthrew the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He was a CIA puppet. The Americans put him in power in Operation Ajax in 1953, together with the British. He was, and the Iranians knew it. This CIA puppet ruled Iran for 25 years, used torture and the secret police to terrorize people, incredibly corrupt, incredibly corrupt. And Ayatollah Khomeini emerged as the leader of the opposition against this foreign puppet. But still, you know, a significant group of people in Iran worked for him because they had dreams and career ambitions, right? So millions of people left Iran after the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Literally millions of Iranians left. And a lot of them went to the United States. They live in California, but not only in California. Fidel Castro overthrowing Fulgencio Batista, the corrupt dictator in Cuba that the Americans sort of tolerated, and so on. Nelson Mandela. So yeah, these figures typically are living symbols of nationalism. They are believed by the people of Korea to represent the aspirations of the Korean people for self-determination, national self-determination. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much a requirement. If you want to be one of these extraordinary political leaders, you have to harness the power of nationalism. Donald Trump represents white American nationalism. He recognized that himself. Donald Trump made a comment several years ago. He said, I could go down Fifth Avenue. You know, Fifth Avenue is a big street in New York City, and I could shoot somebody. Boom! And nothing would happen to me. He knew he was charismatic among the white nationalists. I trust him. If I'm a white nationalist, Donald Trump is like me. He's what I believe is best in America. He's a businessman, not an intellectual. Ugh. Intellectuals. America was founded by people who rejected intellectuals. And that's a topic for American history class. But he claimed he was a Protestant Christian. So only small sections of the population, relatively small sections of the population in Germany, Poland, Hungary, pay attention to politics closely. Maybe about 5% of the population in the United States are actively, very intensely interested in politics. Most people, more than half of adults in the US were either observers or apathetics about politics. And that's true pretty much in all of the countries of the developed world. So who's going to form and lead these political parties? The activists. We should get to some findings about political participation. In virtually all recent comparative research on participation in democracies, including Germany and Italy and France, the most consistent finding is clear. Most people do not engage in high levels of political activity. So not like you. I mean, you chose to take this class. You didn't have to take this class. Why did you take this class? Because you are really attentive. You're approaching that 5%. A second general finding is that occasionally some citizens are willing to engage in more activist modes of political participation. Sometimes people's engagement will change. But still, in the United States, we had 14% more political participation in the contentious 2020 election, but only still 66% of eligible voters voted. So 1/3 of American voters still did not vote, despite all of the turmoil and Donald Trump's controversy and his crazy language and the pandemic, and the 1/3 of American voters did not vote in November 2020. And it will go back down in the next election. So broadly speaking, a substantial variation exists in the portion of citizens who undertake various forms of conventional and unconventional political action. most people employ the conventional modes of voting. That's how most people participate. If they're going to participate in voting, most people think it means voting in elections, and typically that means voting for political parties. And in less democratic countries, like in Russia or in China, there are other more unconventional forms of political participation are more common. So here's a discussion of political interest groups. But since we're reading about parties, I'm going to not go over that right now and instead focus on parties. Types of interest groups. Political parties. A political party, it's an interest group that transforms itself into a political party when the group attempts to capture political power directly by placing its members in governmental office. So political parties emerge because people want to win elections and put their people in charge of the government. That's why they form political parties. So while countries may have thousands of political interest groups, most countries have only a handful of political parties. And how does this relate to Europeanization? It relates to Europeanization because Europeanization has increased opportunities for political participation. If you want to participate, if you felt that, well, I want to participate, but, you know, it's hopeless. There's the standard ways of participating that have always been around, but if you want to participate in European policies for students, for example, because the European Union emphasizes appealing to college students in European universities and encouraging them to engage in European exchange programs, to study in other countries in Europe, at other universities, then you're more likely to also participate in European Parliament elections. And also in other ways, like joining European environmental groups, because the European Union really emphasizes protecting the environment and fighting global climate change. And so it expands the opportunities for political participation if you want it, if you have the desire. It makes it easier to find ways for you to participate, a little bit easier. But again, most people are not likely to respond very much. It's again a focus on future and current elites, ambitious people, co-opting ambitious people so that they have a European perspective as well as a Polish or German or Italian perspective in their political activity and viewpoints and participation. Political parties serve as brokers of ideas. They promote and spread ideas. Political parties serve as agents of political socialization. So keep that in mind as you read about European Union, as these parties in Poland or in Bulgaria or in Italy Europeanize, then they're also increasing the element of European identity, European attitudes in their socialization of their members. Political parties link individuals to the system. As I said, if you want to have an impact in the world, it's very hard to do it on your own. It's almost impossible. You've got to join a group and or a party. Political parties mobilize and recruit activists, people that want to, ambitious future professional politicians. You can identify those people. Hey, by the way, do you guys vote in elections for student government here at Catholic University of Korea? That's typically how you know who is an aspiring future professional politician. They typically show that when they're in high school, not to mention college. They run for student government office. And those people will typically also be the first to join a political party and begin the process of gaining promotion through achievement, status through achievement in the context of that career institution, parties, interest groups, whatever. You might achieved through business, but we're talking about parties now. Political parties coordinate government activities when they get into government, and political parties help organize opposition to the governing group. So they serve as the opposition, to help critique and evaluate the performance of current members of the government. I mean, you have an alternative program in the opposition that you can present to the voters and the people that are paying attention to politics, so they have a better idea, or a worse idea, at least some idea of how the government is performing. So this is a discussion, but I want to make sure we get to the notes in the reading. So Europeanization, Euroscepticism, and politicization in party politics. This person, I went to graduate school with him. He was at the University of Pittsburgh with me in political science graduate school, Paul Taggart. He went back to England. He's got a job as a professor. I think it's Sussex, University of Sussex. So the process of the politicization of the European Union, I should say, of political parties, European Union only in the last 30 years has become a topic of political conflict among the political parties among the member states since the Maastricht Treaty, since the end of the Cold War in 1990 and the negotiation of the Maastricht Treaty, which was signed and came into effect in 1993. Political parties are most visibly present in the European Parliament, but they're also evident in the other European Union institutions. Keep in mind that the Council of Ministers, also called the Council of the European Union, that's the official name, consists of national officials, so ministers. And these ministers are professional politicians. They belong to parties. They're leaders of parties. The European Commission consists of successful former national party politicians. They're not anymore officially representing their national governments or national parties, but they built their entire career until they joined the commission as successful professional party politicians to rise to senior level. Parties, 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 parties. So important, so important. The key role of political parties in the member states of the European Union has been in the framing and shaping of competition regarding the issues of European integration. So political parties represent also Euroscepticism. When we talk about Euroscepticism, we talk about political parties that are Eurosceptic. We talk about United Kingdom Independence Party. Nigel Farage was the leader of Brexit effort, but he formed a party, and that party won European Parliament elections. Keep that in mind. Until 2015, Nigel Farage, United Kingdom Independence Party, came in numero uno, number one, in 2014 European Parliament elections. No, 2015. Now, of course, again, in those elections in Britain for the European Parliament, only about 1/3, 34% of British voters voted. They don't care that much about the European Parliament. But that's how Brexit referendum happened, that David Cameron, the leader of the Conservative Party in Britain, said, I must do something or the United Kingdom Independence Party is going to start winning British elections in Britain for the House of Commons. I must do something to stop that. His party becoming members of the House of Commons. The party, the party, the party. Political parties drive the politics of Europeanization. Political parties therefore politicize European integration issues, and political parties politicize European integration. We already mentioned that we talk about Euroscepticism in terms of Eurosceptic parties. So we're running short on time before I have to shut down Zoom at 11:30. So I want to also do an exercise and see if I can find it here. Big problem with corruption in Bulgaria. And I think I talked about this at a previous class. And yeah, so this is what we talked about, how culture is more important than institutions. Political parties being corrupt. And if the political parties are corrupt, the government is going to be corrupt because these political party leaders become government officials, right? If they win elections, these party leaders become government officials. And if they're corrupt, they're corrupt. It's the way of life. It's part of their culture. So corrupt parties means corrupt governments. And we already covered that. Here you see an interesting report. Germany is placing its second biggest party, the Alternative for Germany party, is a far-right party, the Eurosceptic party, Alternative for Germany party, is being placed under observation by the federal government authorities of Germany. For the first time in its post-war history, Germany has placed its main opposition party under surveillance. Alternative for Germany is the third biggest party in Germany. It is in the opposition. Currently, the government is a coalition between the Christian Democrats and Social Democrats. So this is the opposition party. We talked about opposition, right? Parties forming the opposition. It's placed the Alternative for Germany under surveillance, one of the most dramatic steps yet by a Western democracy to protect itself from the onslaught of far-right forces that have upset politics from Europe to the United States. The decision of the Domestic Intelligence Agency will now allow it to tap phones and other communications and monitor the movements of members of the far-right Alternative for Germany party, which not only sits in the federal parliament in Germany, but has become entrenched at all levels of politics in nearly every part of the nation. So they're in the 16 province governments, legislatures as well. It is among the most sweeping efforts yet to deal with the rise of far-right and neo-Nazi political movements within Western democracies, which are attempting more vigorously to constrain, ostracize, and even legally prosecute those elements to prevent them from chipping away at the foundations of democratic institutions. News of the move came on the same day that France banned Generation Identity, a militant youth movement considered dangerous for its slick rebranding of neo-Nazi concepts, and as lawmakers in the European Parliament in Brussels forced the party of Hungary's semi-authoritarian leader, Viktor Orban, out of the mainstream conservative group in the European Parliament. So this, I wanted to highlight to you how one of the points made at the beginning of the semester was that in what the authors of the textbook call legitimation of governments and policies in the European Union, they not only have to appeal to the people of their own country, they have to appeal to the voters of their own country and win elections. They also have to appeal and satisfy the requirements of the other European countries on them. So Germany, of course, as emphasized in the chapter on Germany that you read in the textbook, was a state. The new German state was constructed and built within the context of integrating Germany under the surveillance, that's a harsh term, under the observation of the rest of Europe after what Germany did in World War I and World War II. So the German Constitution explicitly bans neo-Nazi parties. It explicitly bans totalitarian parties. It explicitly bans parties that are identified as threats to the new democratic system in Germany. And that's in the German Constitution because the Americans and the British and the French, in part, they demanded it. And so you see today in 2021, 70 years after Germany is brought back into Europe, the German government officially putting under official police surveillance the main opposition party in Germany. And they think they have to do this and that they can do it. And that summarizes or illustrates that point, right? That the German authorities not only have to satisfy the German people, they've got to satisfy everybody else in Europe, or at least the powerful countries watching what is going on in Germany. And the German public is willing to accept that. I should say, this is from, 2 months ago, this report. The news reports say now that the Alternative for Germany is going down. It is the third biggest party in the German parliament, but its support is going down. We'll see what happens. Germany will have elections next year. And the claim is in the news media reports today, in early May, is that it'll be the Green Party and the Christian Democrat Party. The Green Party and the Conservative Party, Angela Merkel's party, will come in first next year. They will continue to decline. Maybe. We'll see. Okay? But so there's different kinds of parties. There's the Green Party, that's an environmental, social democrat, postmodern, we talk about modernity, focusing on European integration, environment, LGBTQ rights. And they may come in number one. The word is that the Green Party may form the government next year, but we'll see if they come in first place. But they will come in either, it's close. The German Green Party and the Christian Democratic Party are tied in public opinion polls right now, according to news reports. But maybe this isn't so unusual to you Koreans, because what goes on here. For Germany, the question of how to deal with the far right has particular urgency in an election year that will see Angela Merkel step down after 16 years as chancellor, a tenure in which she became a symbol for a Germany that has learned from its Nazi past and opened itself to refugees seeking shelter from conflict and persecution. Like I said, over 1 million refugees have come to Germany in the last 6 years, from mostly the Middle East and Africa. Because of Germany's Nazi history and the fact that Hitler rose by democratic means before swiftly moving to abolish democracy, the country designed its post-war political structures with inbuilt safeguards to protect against the rise of political forces, primarily another Nazi party that could once again usurp the democracy from the inside. The domestic intelligence agency, known as the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, is one of them. Its founding mission is to act as an early warning mechanism to protect the Constitution against budding threats. The party won 13% of the vote in 2017, 2 years after Merkel welcomed over 1 million refugees into the country. It's now down to about 10%. Well, that's as of March. Despite noticeably radicalizing in recent years and closing ranks with neo-Nazis in street rallies, the Alternative for Germany has pockets of support in state institutions like the police and the military, raising concerns about far-right infiltration of the police and the military. Yet even as the AfD has become more radicalized, the party has established a presence in state and local legislatures across the country. Increasingly concerned about the party's positions, the Domestic Intelligence Agency has spent 2 years scrutinizing the speeches and social media posts of AfD officials for evidence of extremism. An assessment amounting to some 1,100 pages concluded that the party's position violated key principles of liberal democracy, not least Article 1 of the German Constitution, which states that human dignity is unassailable, officials said. A year ago, the intelligence agency announced a first escalation, classifying both the most radical wing of the AfD associated with Björn Höcke, the party's most notorious far-right firebrand, and its youth organization as extremists, and said it would place some of its most influential leaders under surveillance. It goes on here. Against the backdrop of our experience in German history, I can understand fully that the Office for the Protection of the Constitution has designated the AfD as a suspected case of far-right extremism, tweeted Konstantin von Notz, a Green lawmaker and deputy president of the Intelligence Oversight Committee in Parliament. Our democracy defends itself. The question of whether a government agency can put a democratically elected political party under surveillance or even ban it if the party is feared to be a threat to democracy has become a subject not just of fierce debate, but a legal battle. And it goes on here. Last month, an administrative court in Cologne ruled that the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, or its German initials BFV, was allowed to start investigating the AFD for extremism. But maybe for you Koreans, you know, here in South Korea, you are not allowed to work for a pro-North Korean party. You are not allowed to post North Korean propaganda on the internet. You are not allowed to even see or read North Korean websites. So my question to you, please respond to the following statement. German restrictions on so-called extremist parties and South Korean restrictions on pro-North Korean parties share the same motivation to protect democracy. What's your response, Min-jung? What's your response, Chung-sung? Do you strongly agree? Agree? Neutral cannot decide? Disagree? Strongly disagree? That the main purpose or motivation for these restrictions is to protect democracy. And so, we go to polls here. Where are my polls? Second one from the bottom here. And let's see if I can find it here. And where is, what did I do? Oh, there it is. Okay, so vote. One person, what about the other four? What about the other 2? 3, 2, one more. Okay, so I think that's everybody in the class. I don't know if anybody's watching. It says 7 people here participating. So there's one other person who's not here, who's online, it seems. If that other person is going to vote, they better hurry, they should hurry up because time is passing. Okay, well, I'm going to have to shut down Zoom so we have time to record this and save this. So click here. Oh, sorry. What do I want to do? Okay. This one? Thank you. And then, okay.